This issue of Gold Belt Wrestling drops us right into the wrestling scene as 1990 kicks off, packed with speculation, controversy, and some bold predictions for the new decade. Right from the cover, you can tell this is a wild ride with stories on Jake the Snake Roberts' legal troubles, a heated rivalry between Larry Zbyszko and Sergeant Slaughter, the "Is This the Last Hurrah" discussion on Roddy Piper, Dusty Rhodes, and Jimmy Snuka, a deep dive into the Great Mute and his secrets, a surprising look at what the future holds for the WWF in the 1990s, a strange but interesting feature, Wrestlers Fear Most, listing the toughest, most feared wrestlers in the game. It's a loaded magazine that feels like a mix of gossip, news, predictions, and over-the-top 80s or 90s wrestling energy. Let's go through the highlights. Editor-in-Chief Michael O'Hara opens the magazine with a reflective look at how wrestling transformed in the 80s. He highlights the transition from regional territories to two dominant national players, the WWF and the NWA, soon to be WCW. He acknowledges that the WWF surged ahead in the 80s, but by the end of the decade, Ted Turner's NWA WCW was gaining steam. He hints at a looming wrestling war between the two giants and a potential resurgence of regional promotions like the AWA, WCW, and Continental. There's a sense of optimism but also concern. Will wrestling maintain its magic into the 90s, or will corporate control water it down? This was one of the juiciest articles in the issue. Jake Roberts, known for his eerie, methodical promos, and pet snake Damien found himself in serious legal trouble. The story describes how he was convicted of assault and battery in Daytona Beach, Florida, after an altercation that started over the quality of women in the area. Yes, really. Apparently, Roberts and a local man, John Bartlett, were bar hopping, got into an argument, and Jake ended up punching him, breaking bones in the process. The judge revoked Jake's bail immediately, leading to chaos. The article notes that the WWF is doing everything in its power to get Jake out of trouble, as he was one of their top stars. In hindsight, this was just one of many troubles in Roberts' career, but at the time, it put his future in jeopardy. Zbyszko versus Slaughter, AWA's last big rivalry, a feature on one of the hottest feuds in the struggling AWA, Larry Zbyszko versus Sergeant Slaughter. The magazine claims this grudge match is one of the few things keeping the AWA relevant, as both men have strong characters. Zbyszko, the cocky, self-proclaimed living legend who had dethroned Nick Bockwinkel. Slaughter, the no-nonsense drill sergeant, looking to claim another major title. They present this rivalry as AWA's last gasp at staying competitive. Looking back, we know AWA folded shortly after, making this a fascinating time capsule. My favorite part. 90s wrestling magazine journalism at its finest. A literal voting poll asking fans to decide between Miss Elizabeth and Sensational Sherry. Elizabeth, the elegant, soft-spoken first lady of wrestling. Sherry, the brash, aggressive, loud-mouthed villainess. It's kind of funny now knowing how much respect Sherry gets today for her incredible work as a wrestler and manager, but at the time, the magazine framed it purely as a who's hotter battle. The last stand for Piper, Snuka, and Rhodes. A fascinating article questioning whether these three legends could still hang with the younger stars of the 90s. Dusty Rhodes just made the shocking jump to WWF, ditching his common man NWA legacy for polka dots. Roddy Piper was bouncing between Hollywood and WWF. Jimmy Snuka, a surprise return to WWF after years in the wilderness. The writers suggest that while they are still fan favorites, their time might be running out. Looking back, all three continued in the business for decades, but this was the beginning of their transition to part-time status. Here's a really fun feature where anonymous wrestlers listed the scariest guys in the business, whether for their toughness, skill, or just unhinged personalities. Some names included Terry Funk, a brawler who would fight anyone, anywhere. Dr. Death Steve Williams, a legit collegiate wrestler who could take your head off. Stan Hansen, a wild man known for stiff shots. Dynamite Kid, a compact wrecking machine. The Great Muta, mysterious, deadly, and unpredictable. This list reflects the era's view of tough guys and adds some cool insight into who was respected and feared behind the scenes. Secrets of the Great Muta. A deep dive into one of the hottest wrestlers of the time. Muta's mystique was a major selling point. The article explores his background in Japan, his insane athleticism, and his deadly moves like the moonsault and mist-spraying attacks. It also discusses how he was redefining what a foreign heel could be, blending martial arts, high flying, and psychological warfare. We have a wild rumor piece speculating that Hulk Hogan versus Mike Tyson match could happen. It plays up the idea that if Vince McMahon and Don King could reach an agreement, we might see a true wrestler versus boxer showdown. Of course, this never happened, but with Tyson's later involvement in wrestling, WWF in '98, AEW in 2020, it's fascinating to see how long the idea had been floating around. Next up, a shocking story about how Andre was pinned 2 nights in a row by the Ultimate Warrior in under 30 seconds. While we now know Andre's health was declining fast, at the time this was framed as a major passing of the torch moment. It was WWF clearly positioning Warrior as the next dominant force. This magazine is a fantastic time capsule of the wrestling world at the start of 1990. The mix of real news, wild speculation, and over-the-top features captures that era's wrestling journalism perfectly. If you love deep dives into classic wrestling magazines, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep these memories alive and celebrate the wild world of wrestling history.